Sarah Chen had been at Forward Operating Base Nightingale for 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks she had spoken maybe 100 words. She was small, 5'3", 120 pounds, soaking wet. When she walked through the compound in her boots and fatigues, she kept her eyes down and her mouth shut. She carried her medical bag like it weighed nothing, and when the other soldiers passed her in the chow hall or the barracks, they barely noticed her at all. That was exactly what she wanted. But at Fob Nightingale, in the dusty heart of Afghanistan, silence made you a target. Not from the enemy, from your own team. Staff Sergeant Kozlowski was the first to start in on her. "Hey, China doll," he called one morning while she was restocking supplies in the med tent. "You ever gonna speak up, or you just gonna keep playing invisible?" Sarah didn't look up. She folded gauze pads with careful hands and placed them in neat rows. Her jaw tightened, but her face stayed calm. Kozlowski laughed. He was a big man, barrel-chested, the kind of guy who took up space just by breathing. "I'm talking to you, Specialist." "I heard you, Sergeant," Sarah said quietly. "Oh, she does talk." Kozlowski nudged the private next to him. "What do you think, Davison? Think she's got what it takes out here? Think she can handle a real firefight?" Private Davison shrugged. He was young, barely 22. He didn't want trouble, but he didn't want to go against Kozlowski either. "I don't know, Sarge. I do," Kozlowski said louder now. "I think she's going to freeze the first time bullets start flying. I think she's going to curl up and cry for her mama." Sarah's hands stilled for just a second. Then she went back to folding gauze. "Nothing to say?" Kozlowski pressed. "No comeback, no fire?" "No, Sergeant," Sarah said. He snorted. "Figures. You know what your problem is, Chen? You're too damn quiet. Out here, quiet gets people killed. You need to speak up. You need to show some backbone." Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and steady. "I'll do my job, Sergeant. That's all that matters." Kozlowski stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked away, muttering something about how the army was going soft. But the mockery didn't stop there. Over the next 2 weeks, it got worse. The other soldiers started calling her Ghost because she barely made a sound. They joked that she was too fragile for combat, too timid, too scared. Some of them even wondered out loud why she'd been assigned to a forward base at all. She should be back at a hospital in Germany, one of the guys said during a card game Sarah happened to walk past. "Not out here where things get real." "Maybe she's got connections," another replied. "You know how it is. Diversity hire," they laughed. Sarah kept walking. Lieutenant Ramirez, the platoon leader, was one of the few who didn't join in. She was a woman too, taller than Sarah, broader in the shoulders. She'd been in the army for 8 years and had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. One evening, Ramirez found Sarah alone in the med tent, inventorying supplies by flashlight. "You doing okay, Chen?" Ramirez asked. Sarah glanced up. "Yes, ma'am." Ramirez stepped inside and closed the tent flap behind her. "I hear the guy's giving you a hard time." "It's nothing I can't handle, ma'am." "Maybe, but you don't have to handle it alone." Ramirez crossed her arms. "You know, you could make it easier on yourself if you opened up a little. Let them see who you are." Sarah set down her clipboard. "With respect, Lieutenant, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to keep people alive." Ramirez studied her for a moment. There was something in Sarah's voice, something hard and certain, something that didn't match the quiet, timid image everyone else saw. "Fair enough," Ramirez said. "Just know that if things get out of hand, you come to me." "Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Ramirez left and Sarah went back to her inventory. But the truth was, Sarah didn't need anyone to fight her battles. She'd been fighting them her whole life. She'd grown up in a small town in Northern California, the only Asian family on her block, the only girl in her high school who could run 5 miles without breaking a sweat, and then sit down to ace a chemistry exam. She joined the army at 18, not because she needed the money or the structure, but because she wanted to prove something. To who? She wasn't entirely sure anymore. Her father had been a medic in the Navy. He died when she was 12, heart attack sudden. One day he was there, and the next he wasn't. Sarah had found him on the kitchen floor, and she'd tried to do CPR the way she'd seen on TV, but it hadn't worked. She'd carried that failure with her ever since, so she'd studied. She'd trained. She'd become one of the best combat medics in her class at Fort Sam Houston. Top marks in trauma care, top marks in field medicine. She could intubate a patient in under 30 seconds. She could stop a bleed with her eyes closed. But none of that mattered at Fob Nightingale, because here, all anyone saw was a small, quiet woman who didn't fit the mold, and Sarah had learned a long time ago that trying to change people's minds with words was a waste of time. You changed minds with actions, so she stayed quiet. She did her job. She waited, because sooner or later the moment would come. It always did, and when it did, she'd be ready. 3 days later, that moment arrived. The mission was supposed to be routine. Lieutenant Ramirez was leading a squad of 8 soldiers to a village 15 miles south of the base. Intelligence had reported that a local elder wanted to talk. He had information about Taliban movements in the area. It was the kind of thing that happened once or twice a month. You flew in, you talked, you flew out. Sarah was assigned as the medic. She checked her gear twice before they loaded into the Blackhawk. Medical bag, tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, IV kits, morphine. She ran through her mental checklist the way she always did, her lips moving silently as she counted supplies. Kozlowski watched her from across the staging area. "You scared, Ghost?" Sarah didn't answer. "I think she's scared," he said to Davison. Davison didn't laugh this time. He was checking his rifle, his face tight. He didn't like missions outside the wire. None of them did. "Load up," Ramirez called. They climbed into the chopper. Sarah took a seat near the back, her medical bag between her boots. The rotors spun up loud and rhythmic, and the Blackhawk lifted off the ground. The flight was smooth at first. The landscape below was brown and rocky, dotted with clusters of mud brick buildings. The sun was high and hot, turning the horizon into a shimmering blur. Sarah watched the ground fall away and felt the familiar knot in her stomach. She didn't like flying. Never had. But she kept her face blank and her breathing steady. Across from her, Kozlowski was grinning. He loved this part. The adrenaline. The movement. He caught Sarah's eye and shouted over the rotor noise, "Try not to puke, Chen." She ignored him. 15 minutes in, the pilot's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got a tailwind. Should have you on the ground in 10. Ramirez gave a thumbs up. But then, at minute 17, everything went wrong. There was a sound, a sharp metallic crack that cut through the rotor noise like a gunshot. The chopper lurched. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her hand shot out to grab the webbing on the wall. "What was that?" Someone shouted. The pilot's voice came back, tight and fast. "We're taking fire, RPG! Brace!" Another crack. Louder this time. The whole aircraft shuddered, and suddenly they were tilting. Hard to the left, Sarah's medical bag slid across the floor. Soldiers cursed and grabbed for handholds. The world outside the open door spun sickeningly. "We're hit!" the co-pilot yelled. "Engine 2 is out!" The pilot fought the stick. "I can't hold it." "We're going down!" Ramirez's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Everyone hold on. Prepare for hard landing." The chopper dropped. Fast, too fast. Sarah's heart slammed against her ribs. She locked her boots against the floor and gripped the webbing with both hands. The ground rushed up, and then they hit. The impact was brutal. Metal screamed. The world became a blur of noise and motion. Sarah's head snapped forward, and she tasted blood. The chopper skidded across the rocky ground, throwing up dust and debris, and then finally it stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Sarah's ears were ringing. Her vision was blurred. She shook her head, trying to clear it, and tasted copper. "Sound off," Ramirez shouted. Voices started calling out. "Davison, good." "Kozlowski, good." "Martinez, good." Sarah tried to move. Her shoulders screamed in protest, but nothing felt broken. She pushed herself up and grabbed her medical bag. "Chen, good." "Pilots?" Ramirez called forward. There was a groan from the cockpit. "Co-pilot's unconscious," the pilot said, his voice strained. "I think my leg's busted. Chen, get up there," Ramirez ordered. Sarah was already moving. She climbed over twisted metal and a dislodged seat, her boots slipping on hydraulic fluid. The cockpit was a mess. The co-pilot was slumped in his harness, blood running down his face. The pilot was pinned, his leg caught under a collapsed panel. Sarah dropped her bag and went to work. She checked the co-pilot first. Pulse was strong, breathing steady. The head wound looked bad, but it was mostly blood. She packed it with gauze and wrapped it tight. Then she turned to the pilot. "Where does it hurt?" "My leg. Can't feel my foot." Sarah pulled out her trauma shears and cut away his pant leg. The break was bad. "Compound fracture." Bone visible, but the bleeding wasn't arterial. She could work with that. This is gonna hurt, she said. Just do it. She stabilized the leg with a splint from her bag, working fast and efficient. The pilot grunted but didn't scream. Outside, Ramirez was shouting orders. Set a perimeter. We're in hostile territory. Expect contact. Gunfire erupted. Sarah's hands didn't shake. She finished the splint and gave the pilot a shot of morphine. You're good. Stay here. She grabbed her bag and climbed back into the main cabin. Through the open door, she could see the squad taking cover behind rocks. Muzzle flashes lit up the ridge 200 yards away. They're trying to pin us down, Kozlowski shouted. Ramirez was on the radio. Nightingale, this is Raider 1-6. We are down, taking fire. Need immediate extract and air support. Static, then a voice. Raider 1-6, copy. QRF is spinning up. ETA 20 minutes, 20 minutes, Sarah's mind raced. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight. Chen. Ramirez pointed to Martinez, who was crouched behind a rock, clutching his arm. He's hit! Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag and ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. The air cracked and snapped. She dove behind the rock and landed hard next to Martinez. Let me see, she said. Martinez moved his hand. Blood poured from his bicep. Through and through. Clean entry and exit. Sarah pulled a tourniquet from her belt and wrapped it above the wound. She twisted the windlass tight. Martinez hissed through his teeth. You're good, Sarah said. Keep pressure on it. She turned to move back to cover, but then she saw it. Davison, the young private. He was out in the open, 30 feet from the chopper. He'd been thrown clear in the crash. He wasn't moving. Davison's down, Sarah shouted. Ramirez looked. Her face went pale. He's too far. We can't reach him. Kozlowski fired a burst toward the ridge. They've got that whole area covered. Sarah looked at Davison, looked at the open ground, looked at the muzzle flashes on the ridge, and then she ran. Chen, no. Ramirez's shout was swallowed by gunfire. Sarah's boots pounded the dirt. Her medical bag slapped against her hip. Bullets cut the air around her, so close she could feel the pressure of them passing. 30 feet felt like 30 miles. She hit the ground next to Davison and rolled him over. His eyes were half open, unfocused. Blood soaked the front of his vest. She ripped it open, chest wound. Left side, sucking. She could hear the air hissing in and out. Sarah's training took over. Everything else disappeared. The gunfire, the shouting, the fear. There was only Davison and the wound. She tore open a chest seal and slapped it over the hole. The hissing stopped. She checked his pulse. Weak but there. She keyed her radio. Davison's alive. Tension pneumothorax. I need help getting him back. We're pinned down. Kozlowski shouted back. Sarah looked up. The squad was 200 feet away, behind the chopper and the rocks. Between her and them was open ground. A kill zone. She looked back at Davison. His lips were turning blue. No choice. She grabbed him under the arms and started dragging. He was heavy. Dead weight. Sarah's boot slipped in the loose dirt. Her shoulder, already bruised from the crash, screamed. But she pulled 1 step, 2 steps. Bullets stitched the ground to her right. She jerked left, still pulling. Covering fire! Ramirez screamed. The squad opened up. A wall of noise. The incoming fire slacked just enough. Sarah pulled harder. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. 10 more feet. 5. And then hands were grabbing Davison, pulling him behind cover. Kozlowski hauled Sarah down beside him. Are you crazy? He shouted. Sarah didn't answer. She was already back on Davison, checking his vitals. The chest seal was holding. She pulled out an IV kit and started a line in his arm. He's in shock, she said to no one in particular. Needs a chest tube in a hospital. 20 minutes, Ramirez said, firing over a rock. QRF inbound. Sarah looked at Davison's pale face. He doesn't have 20 minutes. She pulled out her field surgical kit. A chest tube insertion in a combat zone was risky, but doing nothing was certain death. Hold him, she told Kozlowski. For once, the big sergeant didn't argue. He pinned Davison's shoulders. Sarah felt for the landmarks on Davison's ribs. 5th intercostal space. Mid-axillary line. She prepped the site with betadine, made the incision, and inserted the tube in under a minute. Air and blood drained out. Davison's breathing eased. Color started to return to his face. Sarah taped the tube in place and sat back, breathing hard. Kozlowski stared at her. Where the hell did you learn that? Fort Sam, Sarah said. Bullshit. That wasn't textbook. That was more gunfire. Cut him off. Closer now. The enemy was advancing. They're moving on our position, Martinez shouted. Ramirez keyed the radio again. Nightingale, we need air support now. We can't hold. Air support is 5 minutes out, the voice crackled back. 5 minutes. Still too long. Sarah looked at the chopper. It was tilted on its side, the rotor blades bent and broken, but the guns were still intact. The M240 mounted on the side door. She crawled to Ramirez. Lieutenant, the door gun. Ramirez followed her gaze. It's exposed. Anyone on that gun is a sitting duck, but it's got the angle on the ridge. Ramirez hesitated. Sarah could see the calculation in her eyes. Risk 1 to save 8. I'll do it, Kozlowski said. No, Sarah said. You're a better shot with the rifle. You need to keep them from flanking. I'll take the gun, Kozlowski laughed. You ever even fired a .240? Sarah looked him dead in the eye. Yes. Something in her voice made him stop. Ramirez made the call. Do it, Chen, we'll cover you. Sarah moved before she could think about it. She crawled to the chopper, climbed inside, and positioned herself behind the M240. The gun was heavy, still mounted on its swing arm. She checked the feed, still loaded. She pulled back the charging handle and aimed at the ridge. Through the sights, she could see them. A dozen fighters moving down the slope, using the rocks for cover. They thought the downed chopper crew was helpless. They were wrong. Sarah squeezed the trigger. The gun roared to life. The recoil hammered her shoulder, but she held steady. Tracer rounds cut through the air, slamming into the rocks where the enemy hid. They scattered. Dove for cover, fired back. Bullets sparked off the chopper's frame. One punched through the metal 6 inches from Sarah's head. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her aim and fired again. 2 fighters went down. The rest pulled back. She's doing it, Martinez shouted. She's got them pinned. But the chopper was taking hits. Too many. The frame groaned. Something inside sparked and started smoking. Chen, get out of there, Ramirez yelled. It's gonna blow. Sarah saw the smoke, smelled the fuel. But if she left the gun, the enemy would advance. The squad would be overrun. She kept firing. Chen! Kozlowski was running toward her. Move, the smoke got thicker. The heat was building. Sarah's eyes watered, but she stayed on the gun. And then she heard it, a sound she'd been praying for. The deep, rhythmic thump of rotor blades. She looked up and saw them. 2 Apache attack helicopters coming in fast and low. Air support inbound, Ramirez screamed. The Apaches opened up. Hellfire missiles streaked from their rails. The ridge exploded in fire and dust. Sarah finally let go of the gun. She stumbled out of the chopper, coughing, her face black with smoke. Kozlowski caught her before she fell. You insane little... He shook his head at a loss for words. The Apaches made another pass. The enemy fire stopped completely. 5 minutes later, the QRF choppers arrived. 2 Blackhawks fully loaded with fresh soldiers and medics. Sarah helped load Davison onto a stretcher. The flight medic looked at the chest tube, then at Sarah. You do this? She nodded. Clean work, he said, impressed. They loaded the wounded. The pilots. Davison. Martinez. Sarah climbed in last, her legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. As the chopper lifted off, Kozlowski sat down next to her. His face was serious. No mockery. No jokes. Hey, Chen, he said quietly. Yeah? I was wrong about you. Sarah looked at him. Nodded once. Damn right you were. The base was chaos when they landed. Medical personnel swarmed the chopper. Davison was rushed to surgery. The pilots were stabilized. Martinez was treated and released. Sarah tried to slip away in the confusion, but Lieutenant Ramirez caught her arm. Not so fast, Specialist. Colonel wants to see you. Sarah's stomach tightened. Ma'am? Now. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood at attention in Colonel Briggs's office. The colonel was a career officer, 48 years old, silver hair, a chest full of ribbons. She sat behind her desk reading a report while Sarah waited. Finally, Briggs looked up. At ease, Specialist. Sarah shifted to parade rest. Briggs set down the report. Lieutenant Ramirez gave me a full debrief. She tells me you saved 3 lives today, including Private Davison, who would have died without that chest tube. Just doing my job, ma'am. Your job, Briggs repeated. Your job is to provide medical support, not to run into enemy fire, not to man a door gun on a smoking chopper. She paused. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah hesitated. I asked you a question, Specialist. Fort Sam, ma'am. And before that, growing up, my father taught me. Your father. Briggs pulled up something on her computer. Your file says your father was a Navy corpsman. Died when you were 12. Yes, ma'am. Briggs scrolled through the screen. Her eyes narrowed. Your file also says you completed combat medic training with the highest scores in your class. Marksmanship expert. Field trauma specialist. Certified in advanced tactical emergency casualty care. She looked up. So why the hell have you been acting like a church mouse for 3 weeks? Sarah's jaw tightened. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. Because it doesn't matter what my file says. It doesn't matter what I can do. The moment I open my mouth or stand out, half the base writes me off as cocky or trying too hard, and the other half decides I'm a diversity checkbox. Sarah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. So I stopped trying to prove myself with words. I figured I'd let my work speak for me. Briggs was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. I understand that, Chen, more than you know. I've been in the Army for 26 years. I've dealt with the same garbage. She leaned forward. But here's the problem. You're not just good. You're exceptional. And exceptional soldiers don't get to hide. Whether you like it or not, people need to see what you can do, because that's how we change the culture. That's how we prove that women like us belong here. Sarah didn't respond. Briggs stood. I'm recommending you for the Army Commendation Medal with Valor, and I'm putting you in for the next Special Operations Combat Medic course. If you pass, you'll be attached to a Ranger battalion. Sarah's eyes widened. Ma'am? You've got the skills, Chen. You've got the nerve. And after today, you've got the proof. Briggs extended her hand. What do you say? Sarah looked at the colonel's hand. Then she took it. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. I know you won't. 2 weeks later, Sarah was in the chow hall when Kozlowski sat down across from her. He set his tray down and looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I owe you an apology. Sarah glanced up from her food. You already said that. No, I said I was wrong. That's not the same as sorry. He rubbed the back of his neck. I gave you hell because I thought you were weak. I thought you didn't belong, and I was a jackass. Sarah set down her fork. Yeah, you were. Kozlowski nodded. Davison's gonna make it, by the way. Full recovery. Doc said if you'd waited even 2 more minutes, he'd be dead. He paused. His mom sent a letter, asked me to thank the medic who saved her son. He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah picked it up. Inside was a handwritten note on floral stationery. The handwriting was shaky, emotional. I don't know your name, but my son told me you pulled him out of hell. You gave him a second chance at life. I will pray for you every day for the rest of mine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was signed Deborah Davison. Sarah folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her pocket. You good? Kozlowski asked. Yeah, Sarah said quietly. I'm good. Kozlowski stood to leave, then stopped. Hey, Chen, one more thing. What? We don't call you Ghost anymore. He grinned. New call sign just went around the platoon. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What is it? Hold fast, she blinked. Hold fast? Yeah, because when everything went to hell, you held the line. You held the chopper. You held us together. He nodded once. It fits. And then he walked away. Sarah sat alone in the chow hall, the letter from Davison's mother warm in her pocket. Around her, soldiers came and went. A few nodded at her as they passed. One even said, good to see you, Holdfast. She didn't smile. But something inside her eased. Just a little. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her father, about the day she found him on the kitchen floor, about the helplessness she'd felt. She'd spent 12 years trying to make up for that moment, trying to save people the way she couldn't save him, and today she finally had 3 lives. 3 people who were alive because she'd been there, because she'd trained, because she'd refused to quit. Sarah closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, the weight on her chest felt lighter. She didn't need anyone to know her story. She didn't need the glory or the recognition, but if her silence had made her invisible, her actions had made her unforgettable, and in the end, that was enough. 3 months later, Sarah graduated at the top of her class from the Special Operations Combat Medic course. She was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment, one of only a handful of women ever to serve in that capacity. On her first day with the unit, the Ranger medic instructor looked at her file and then looked at her. Hold fast, he said. I've heard about you. Sarah stood at attention. Yes, Sergeant. Good things, he added. Real good things. He handed her a patch. The Ranger scroll. Welcome to the regiment, Specialist Chen. Let's see what you've got. Sarah took the patch, and for the first time in her career, she allowed herself a small smile. "I won't let you down, Sergeant." "I know," he said. "That's why you're here." And as Sarah walked out onto the range with her new unit, the sun rising over Fort Benning, she realized something. She'd spent her whole life trying to prove she was good enough, but she'd had it backwards. She didn't need to prove anything. She just needed to be herself. And that, it turned out, was more than enough.